Hello, and welcome back to your free Windows 7 training course for the 7680 exam. In this video, I will look at offline files. Offline files have been in Windows since Windows XP. Since then, it has continued to improve. The basic functionality of offline files is to keep a cached copy of network files on the local computer. This either allows the user to access the files when the server is not available, or when the user chooses to work offline. Offline files work in 4 different modes, which determine if the network version of the file or the local cache file is used. The first mode is online mode, which is the default mode. When offline files is used in this mode, file writes are sent to the server. Read requests are performed from the local cache to improve performance. All the rest of the modes involve switching from online mode to another mode and then back again as required. The second mode is auto offline mode. This is done when the server or the connection is lost or there are network problems. Once in auto offline mode, read and writes are directed to the offline copy. Offline files will check every 2 minutes to see if the connection comes back up. If it does, offline files will switch back to the server copy. The third mode is manual offline mode. This mode is selected by the user. When the user selects manual offline mode, the computer will start using the offline copy. The offline copy will be used until the user decides to switch back to online mode. The last mode is slow link mode. This mode is selected when network performance degrades below a specified threshold. When this occurs, the computer will start using the local cache for reads and writes. If the latency of the link goes below the threshold, the computer will switch back to online mode. Let's have a look at how to use offline files in Windows 7. To demonstrate offline files, I will first open Windows Explorer and go to a network drive that I have already mapped to a server. If you want to make the whole share available offline, right-click the share and select Always Available Offline. In some cases you may want to do this, but on large shares that are dynamic in nature, that is, files are being added and removed all the time, making the entire share available offline will increase the number of files that need to be synchronized and increases the amount of disk space required to hold the offline files. To make a single folder available offline, right-click it and then select the option Always Available Offline. Notice now that the folder is available offline and there is a set of little green arrows added to the folder to indicate this folder is available offline. If I go into the folder templates, if I only want to make certain files available offline, I can individually select them and select Always Available Offline. Currently, offline files is in online mode. In online mode, writes will be directed to the server and read will be performed from the local cache where possible. Notice that I have the option at the top to switch offline folders into offline mode by selecting Work Offline. In this particular case, I won't select this option, but instead I will disconnect my file server from the network. Notice that when I do this, Windows 7 will automatically switch to Auto Offline mode. In Auto Offline mode, all reads and writes will be performed on the local version of the file. Notice that the folders that I did not make available offline have crosses on them. The folder Templates does not have a green set of arrows on it or a cross. This is because if I go into the folder, some files are available offline and some are not. Because the files in this folder are mixed, Windows can't display an icon on this folder. The individual files, however, in the folder will have an icon on them to tell the user if they are available offline or not. If I go into Docs folder, this is available offline. Note that I can create new files and also delete files in this folder. I can also modify files like the prices file here. In this file, I will make Microsoft Training free. This change will be replicated to the server once the server comes back online. But what happens if a change is made to the same file by another user before this occurs? To demonstrate this, I will change to my Windows Server 2008 R2 computer and open the file from the server. I will change the price file on the server and this time make the price for Microsoft Training $1,000 rather than free. If I change back to my Windows 7 computer, I now have the same file in the local cache and the server that have different data. This will cause a replication conflict when the server comes back online. To demonstrate this, I will now reconnect the server to the network. Notice down at the bottom that the offline status is not connected. Windows 7 will check to see if the connection has come back every 2 minutes. I will skip forward in the video so we don't have to wait. Now that the server is back online, I will select the icon Sync Center from the Sys tray to open the Sync Center. The Sync Center is responsible for syncing changes with offline files, but can also be used to sync files on your mobile devices. At present, Windows 7 will not perform a file sync automatically because none have been set up. To set up a sync relationship, right-click Offline Files and select the Schedule for Offline Files. This will start the Offline Files Sync Schedule wizard. Once I select which shares that I want to sync, the next option I will get is to sync at a scheduled time or when an event occurs. If you want to make sure the sync operations are performed outside hours, you should set up a scheduled time. In most cases, you will want to select when an event occurs. When you select this option, you have a few different options. You can select additional options by selecting the option More Options. The additional options are related mostly to power consumption. These include options such as if you will perform sync when the computer is not running off batteries. Options also include to wake the computer up to perform a sync and to stop a sync if the computer is not idle. If I go back to the standard options, in most environments you will want to select the option When I log on to my computer. Usually changes are made on laptops when out and about. When you come back to the office and log back in, this is when you want to make sure that these changes are captured. Microsoft does not have an option to sync the computer when the network connection becomes available. To get around this, I can select the options I lock Windows and I unlock Windows. In most organizations, the computer will lock automatically if it has been idle for a certain amount of time. If the user comes back, say from lunch, and the network was down for a little bit, synchronization will automatically be triggered by the computer being locked and unlocked. File synchronization is performed in the background, so should not cause too much disruption to the user. Otherwise, the user will need to perform a manual synchronization when there is a network outage or simply lock and unlock their workstation. On the last screen of the wizard, you can set a name of the schedule. In this case, I will accept the default. If I want to manually perform a synchronization of offline files, right-click Offline Files and select Sync Offline Files. Notice that when I perform this, I get a conflict. This is because the price file was changed in 2 different locations at the same time. To resolve sync conflicts, select Conflicts to show all the conflicts that were found in the last sync. When I select the file, I will get the option to keep the local version. The next option is to keep the version on the server, and the last option is to keep both versions. Since we would like to keep our training free, I will select the first option. The version on the laptop will now be copied to the server, so the local offline cache version and the server version will both have the same price of free. If I now select View Sync Partnerships, notice I also have additional options like Sync Results. This will show the results of all the syncs that have been performed on this computer. The last option, Sync Setup, will allow you to configure a new sync partnership. For additional offline file options, select the option Manage Offline Files from the left-hand side. The button at the top allows you to disable offline files. This will remove offline files from the computer, including the local cached copy. The next button will open the Sync Center. This is where we just were. The last option will view which files are in your local cache. This can be useful when troubleshooting offline files. On the next tab are options for disk usage. If you want to change the default values, select the option Change Limits. You would only need to do this if you had a really large share that you wanted to make available offline. If this was the case, I would consider only making part of the share available offline. This not only saves you disk space, but will also decrease the time to perform synchronizations. The button Delete Temporary Files will remove the temporary files that are used with offline files. These include changed files that may not have been synchronized yet. If you need to remove these files, I would first perform a sync to make sure that all the files have been updated. On the next tab, you have the option to encrypt offline files. When this option is selected, all local cached offline files will be encrypted using EFS. This is done so if your laptop is stolen or lost, no one will be able to read the offline files on the hard disk. The last tab allows you to configure how often Windows will check for a slow link. The default is 5 minutes. There are not too many options here. In fact, one of the options is grayed out and can't be configured. In order to configure these settings, this brings us to our next topic, configuring offline files with group policy. The group policy settings for offline files can be found under Computer Configuration, Administrative Templates, Network and Offline Files. There are only a couple of group policy settings that I would like to go through, as most of them are pretty self-explanatory. To do this, I will switch to my Windows 7 computer. From the Start menu, run gpedit.msc to open the local group policy editor. Once I expand down to offline files, the first setting that I want to look at is exclude files from being cached. When working in one of the offline modes, this policy, when set, will prevent the user from creating files offline with these extensions. If the user wants to create these files, they will have to do so when they are connected to the server. The next setting, Files Not Cached, determines which file types will not be made available offline. This last setting only stops the file from being created when using the offline copy. This setting will prevent files with these extensions being copied to the offline cache. For example, if I enter in the extension type of MDB, this will prevent MS Access databases from being available offline. Database files like these should not be made available offline, as databases by their very nature are changing all the time. Offline files are not able to replicate changes in database files. It is best to only have database files available online to ensure they are cached in only one location. By default, Windows 7 will not cache the files showing below. MDB is already included, so I don't need to configure it. All these files are database-related files. If you need these files to be available offline, you need to configure this setting to override the default settings. The next group policy setting that I want to look at is Configure Slow Link Mode. This setting allows you to customize when slow link mode is used on different file servers and shares. For example, if I add in FS1, I can configure offline files to be used when the latency of the connection goes over 50. I can also configure throughput setting or a combination of both. For example, I could configure slow link mode to operate on DC1 when the latency is above 50 and the throughput is less than 10,000. These settings give you a lot of customization, But if you just want a more general setting, you can configure the next setting, Configure Slow Link Speed. This setting allows you to set a value when slow link mode will be used. For example, the default is 64 kilobits per second. This value will be used regardless of where the share is stored. That's it for offline files. In the next video, I will look at transparent caching. This is a new feature of Windows 7 that gives you some of the features of offline files. Transparent caching is aimed more at improving performance of the computer while still connected to the network via a high-speed link. Thanks again for watching this free training series of Windows 7. For more videos, please feel free to visit our web page or YouTube channel.